Jeremy, because our high streets are the beating heart of our communities, aren't they? And for many people, I know I can relate to my high street, it is such a depressing sight, walking down there and seeing them all boarded up and closed down.
But how often do you walk down the boarded up high street? I think people move on to something else. The online world is very big, and lots of other things are very exciting. And so people, the shop, I like to go to my GP in a shopping centre and get my tests done there rather than tramp off all the way to the GP, for example. And children could go to little schools in the high street. I've seen that happen already. So lots of things could happen to the high street. It could be much more a social centre, much more kind of like pubs, coffee shops, all that. Charities. I don't see anything wrong with charities taking over, but the idea of the shop-centred high street finished, that's gone, never coming back. Goodbye. It's not sad, it's just life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good evening, I'm Will Hollis. At 7 o'clock, your top stories. A man has been charged with the attempted kidnapping of a 3-year-old girl in Wolverhampton. 37-year-old Richard Stacey will appear at Walsall Magistrates Court tomorrow, charged with attempted child abduction, assault and affray. The young girl was not injured during the incident. In other news, 3 teenagers have been charged with the murder of a 17-year-old boy in Bedford. Thomas Taylor was stabbed near Bedford bus station on Wednesday. 18-year-old Ahmed Adam and 2 other males aged 16 and 17, who can't be named for legal reasons, have been charged with his murder. A 60-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of assisting an offender, but has since been bailed. The boys have been remanded into custody and will appear at Luton Magistrates Court on Monday. Detectives have made 3 more arrests over the weekend. Bedfordshire Police say they've increased patrols in the area following the absolutely shocking incident and continue to appeal for information. Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has accused the Health Secretary of attempting to conceal the reality of grooming gangs after he claimed the public discourse could risk vilifying certain communities. Wes Streeting had said that the rhetoric around grooming gangs risked causing a second New Zealand mosque massacre. Mr Farage told the Telegraph newspaper that his remarks were insulting. That's now as Labour MP Dan Carden has broken ranks from Sir Keir Starmer, joining Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham in his calls for a national inquiry into the scandal. An off-duty policewoman who was killed by a lorry as she helped at the scene of a crash epitomises the very best of British policing, a senior officer has said. PC Rosie Pryor was standing on the verge of the A19 at Bagby near Thirsk with the driver and passenger of one of the cars involved when the lorry collided with them yesterday morning. Miss Pryor and a 41-year-old man, Ryan Welford, from Knaresborough, both died at the scene. The 65-year-old lorry driver was arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. He's been released under investigation. A teenage boy who was a passenger in Mr. Welford's car is in a serious but stable condition in hospital. The UK Health Security Agency has extended its cold weather health alert for all of England until Tuesday. Amber alerts will now run until January the 14th, meaning a rise in deaths, particularly among those aged 65 and over or with health conditions, is likely. Temperatures dropped to minus 13.9 degrees overnight, but the Met Office has said that the cold spell is coming to an end. Those are your latest headlines, but now let's get you over to Josh.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good evening, I'm Josh Howie and this is Free Speech Nation. This is the show where we take a look at culture, current affairs and politics, and when necessary, we push back. It has been a seismic week of victories against regressive, progressive policies, but the fight for common sense continues, so join us as coming up on tonight's show. The civil service have decided that it's not transphobic to express gender-critical views, but only after settling an employment tribunal. I'm joined by Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters, Helen Joyce, and I'll be asking journalist Nicole Lampert. And are the changes at Meta a victory for free speech? We'll be asking the Director of the Social Market Foundation, Theo Bettram. And, of course, myself and my fantastic panel will be answering questions from our wonderful studio audience. My comedian guests this evening are Cresta Wetton and Kerry Marks. Hello. Welcome.
Thanks.
How are you, Cresta? You all right?
Well, thank you, yes.
Yeah, you seem well when I saw you 2 seconds ago outside.
Still doing fine. How are you?
I haven't changed. Everything's wonderful. And Kerry, how are you? This is your first time on Free Speech Nation?
Doesn't change over 2 seconds. I've noticed this.
She's very
impressive.
unchanged, yes.
Yes, it's my first time on Free Speech Nation, and my first time I've been allowed to talk to people. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I don't want to over-try and ingratiate myself with the audience, but you all look beautiful.
That's it. Classic.
How was that?
Yeah, 2 people. At work then, yes. So, welcome. How are you finding the stalls? It's a different kind of fish behind the desk.
First time I'm not sinking,
That's
so
that's all we
I always
wanted
get
for
the
you.
sinking chair.
There we go. Right, we're going to start with some questions from the audience. Our first question is from Ryan. Hello.
Hello, good evening all. Is it right that the taxpayer is bailing out Stonewall?
Yes, so why is the taxpayer bailing out Stonewall? This week, new accounts reveal Stonewall are now more dependent on taxpayers' money as its finances suffer, prompting calls from public bodies to end their support for it. The LGBTQ plus another few letters, I imagine, lobbying group reported a deficit of more than £800,000 as its income fell while it was forced to use up half its reserves, new accounts show. So, yeah, what do you think about this? I mean, it seems incredible they're getting, I think it's about £620,000 they're getting from taxpayers.
I mean, I think Stonewall I was a big supporter of, but years ago, since they were ideologically captured, I think they've deserted gays and lesbians. And I think LGB Alliance has taken up the slack of what Stonewall used to do. And I think it's absolutely abhorrent that the taxpayer is supporting Stonewall. Just let them go to the wall.
There we go, yes. So, I mean, Cresta, it's...
Well, this is it. It's not like, oh, 600 grand, no, sorry, we don't have that. If it was free, I wouldn't take it if it was free. I don't want them. I don't want them anymore.
Well, yeah, you say you don't want them, but it's also that they've been so entrenched within the public. It's not just the money, it's also they've been entrenched within public institutions.
I'm stunned that they're not making money, because I thought their whole business model was to go in and say, you need to know about this and we'll do you a course. And I thought, oh, can't fail, but apparently it can.
Well, you say that it's not fair, but it's going down a little bit. I believe last year or the year before it was 2.9 million, and now it's only 2.4 million. Boo-hoo.
To hell with them. That's what I say. So LGBT, originally it was a few years back, LGBTQIP2SAA. And then now, I think it's as long as pi, you know, and still growing. And yes, you're right, they started off as a very good charity for a gay charity, and then they started self-identifying as a trans charity, and from that became trans-obsessed, but with the ideology, and we're no longer a charity, but an activist organisation, which reaches a point where they say, well, I think hundreds of teachers agreed, or in schools agreed, that teachers shouldn't even use the words boys and girls anymore, which must have made classes very interesting, for biology and so on. So yeah, what they've spread is an insane understanding of biology, human nature, and so on. It should have always been laughable, but it went beyond their remit. And so what's happening now is, of course, companies are pulling back from it, and the question is, should the public still be paying for it? I'd say no. How do you feel?
There we go.
There you go. See, I was right then.
I think that this audience might be slightly biased by being here. But yes, a Stonewall spokesman said many charities have financially struggled because of COVID and the economic downturn, and Stonewall is no different. However, our work to advocate for LGBTQ plus equality has never been more important as rights are being rolled back globally. Oh God, it goes on. We are confident that support will increase as wider society rallies against the increasing suppression of rights globally. So it seems like they're focused very much on this globally. Now, as we know... Well, this is what they seem to be pivoting to, because, of course, when we got in this country. We got marriage rights and full equality rights for homosexuals. You would think that that would be the job was done, and that's arguably why some people say they pivoted then towards the trans stuff, because they saw that that was a way to keep going. And now it seems like they've also had a meeting go, let's stop worrying about the trans, let's focus on the global issue, which is actually valid in that there's a huge amount of homophobia, of course, across the globe that does need to be dealt with.
I look forward to seeing their work, and I'll be supporting them when they open a branch in the Middle East, of course.
Very good. Our next question is from Melvin.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Why do you think it took so long for the Waheed investment ad to be banned?
Yes, so this Waheed investment ban, the Independent reports that adverts for an Islamic investment platform on London's trains and buses showing US dollar and euro banknotes on fire has been banned. It comes after a regulator ruled that they were likely to cause serious offence. Thank you, I appreciate that. So, well, actually, I do want to ask very quickly, have you seen these ads yourself?
Yes, I have.
What do you think about them?
Well, why they haven't been... The answer to the question I would answer is that they haven't been banned because it's TfL and they're a law to themselves.
Yes, very good. I mean, you've seen them. We've been talking about this.
The reason it took so long is because they were busy banning junk food ads, and they couldn't have a picture of a K-cup. So there's just been some stuff to get through, but they're getting on it now.
Yes. Have you seen those ads as well?
I saw the adverts, and yes, I think you're right. There's a level of hypocrisy, and of course there was the Beachbody adverts, which they were like, no, we can't.
There's also hot dogs, but we've got. I think we have a copy of the advert for our audience to see at home. Yes, it's Kerry, and that should be definitely banned. There it is.
No, it shouldn't.
So, join the money revolution. Now, please, at home, please note the gentleman with the beard, note the finger in the air, and note the banknotes being burnt, because the argument goes from some people that this is actually not just advertising this money service, but actually advertising Islam, or maybe even more extreme forms of Islam, in that the gentleman with the beard, he's been banned from a bunch of countries for extreme rhetoric. And this thing, putting your finger up like that, doesn't just mean I'm just checking which way the wind's blowing. It also is... what
does it mean?
It means, like, one God, and a lot of terrorists actually use it as when they're...
Really?
Yeah, no.
I have no idea about that.
Yeah.
OK.
Well, now you know. Welcome to Free Speech
That's
Nation.
quite important context, isn't it? If you're burning specifically euros and American dollars and saying one God, I can see why some people might find that a bit much.
Well, also... the principle, though... OK, I'm going to argue the other way, because the principle... the Islamic principle of making money from money is actually a Christian principle, right? That's where it starts from, which has always been a bit two-sided, because much like Christians, of course, sort of turn the other cheek against violence, but did an awful lot of violence in the world. And banking has changed. We're now in a world where money creation happens. You know, it's not a finite source anymore. So it no longer really makes sense. But it's OK. People have their own customs, their own ways. That's fine. I think the optics of this look bad. I think that's probably why people are getting upset about it. It looks like an attack on the West. You're seeing, euros and dollars going up. But to be fair, artists have been doing that for a long time. There was, I think it was like the K Foundation, was it, back in '96, who burnt £1 million in Scotland.
I don't believe they were using Islamists to advertise.
No, they weren't. But then you can't say one rule for us and one rule for other people. And I think if we're going to say it's OK to burn money sometimes, then I'm going to say, yeah, that's right. So I do think whilst there's a lot of discussion about multiculturalism and so on, it's not a good optic, and it looks like it's a cultural attack.
Fair enough. Right. Well, we are going to go to a break now. We have plenty more to come. Join us in 2 minutes. See you then.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Before she even met Prince Harry, her passion was sharing recipe tips, lifestyle, wellness techniques, because she had a blog, quite a successful blog actually, called The Tig. Of course, that had to be shut down when she became a working member of the royal family. We all know the turmoil that happened with Megxit. Now that her and Harry have come out the other side of that and have signed multi-million-pound deals with Netflix and others, this is the proof in the pudding, pardon the pun, and it is basically, I suspect, the TIG 2.0, because we've got everybody... she has managed to get everybody talking about this. You know, the royal family has been dragged through turmoil over the last few years because partly due to Harry and Meghan's decision, partly due to the royal family's decision, but this is kind of what's come out the other side.
which is a load of nonsense. I mean, the fact, because it's all totally fake, isn't it? I mean, it's not her house, it's not her kitchen. She clearly doesn't spend her days picking strawberries and collecting honey from bees. I mean, the whole thing's just a fabrication.
Well, it's Netflix fantasy, isn't it? So I think any lifestyle programme such as this tends to not be filmed in the host's house. It's reportedly a $5 million rented house. The cooker itself is worth about $15,000. Even the pans are about $80 as well that she is using. So yes, Stephen, you're right. It is kind of fake and fantasy, but then, of course, that's how these lifestyle programmes are made. It's whether the question will be when you watch the series, if you decide to watch the series, is Meghan trying to portray herself as this authentic self, or is she going to make it clear that, you know, this is just like the best bits of her life? But she's got lots of celebrity friends involved in it, including her makeup artists and others as well. Prince Harry makes an appearance.
Of course he does.
Yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. We actually have a couple more questions, and they're pretty interesting and important from our audience. We're going to go now to Anton. Hello.
Do you think it's the end of woke?
Yes. Are we seeing the end of corporate woke in particular? Because this is McDonald's. They have become the latest and the largest US, one of the companies, to roll back its diversity targets following a Supreme Court ruling on positive discrimination on American university campuses. The fast food giant said it would abandon targets for achieving diverse representation in senior roles and change the name of the diversity team to become the Global Inclusion Team.
GIT.
Yes, that's it. That's exactly it.
I mean, the GIT. Oh, that's nice.
This is a big deal. McDonald's, obviously a huge company, global company.
Yes.
For them to turn around and suddenly go, actually, we're just going to sort of change the name and not really do it that much anymore.
Sure, they're not really doing much, but they are. They're going back, at least in talk on the DEI they've had for ages of being all about diversity, because we've all been to McDonald's, and I've seen it since the inception. I think we all go in there and go, there's not enough diversity, right, in McDonald's. Of all places that really didn't need it, you know. For a long time, there's been the Big Mac Index, you know about that, because it averages out how much people pay, started by The Economist back in, I think, the 90s. And I think, really, we need a Big Mac index of where we're at with diversity at the moment, which is we're seeing a change. I know you might not say it's not enough, but it is a change that's happening in a major company, and with Walmart as well.
Well, Walmart, yeah,
very significant.
It is significant, isn't it? Don't you think, Chris?
Well, yes, it sounds significant, but also the global inclusion. What was the T?
Team.
Team. Thank you.
Yeah.
That sounds remarkably similar to the DEI team, doesn't it? I look forward to seeing what the differences are going to be.
Yes. I mean, the thing is, I once went to McDonald's in India, and it was not diverse at all. Everybody was Indian, and I think they really need to get on that.
Well, they're in trouble anyway at the moment, aren't they, with all their scandals?
Yes, that's the other thing as well. They've had a few sexual...
Maybe they're saying something a bit louder. Hey, guys, look over here. There's something else going on.
They're not happy meal.
They've been alleged, I should say, that they are fighting
yes,
it. Yeah,
allegedly.
Exactly. Well, there we go. Right, our final question for the moment is from Big Steve. Hello.
Hello, Josh. You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. I like the way you're holding your mic there.
Yes, it's
very
nice,
nonchalant.
nice and comfortable. Yes.
Resting it between your breasts.
Thanks, Lou. Thanks for that.
Thank you for that.
I'm trying to hide them. Is it right for Facebook to ban nudists?
Well, how appropriate.
Yeah, I thought you was getting at that.
This is war has broken out between Britain's nudists and Mark Zuckerberg, as they are still banned from posting their bits and bobs on Meta's platform, despite the company's new free speech platform and agenda. Are you a member of any nudist policy? Do you want to come next week?
I'm thinking of an OnlyFans account, but I've got to speak to the missus.
Fair enough. Look, I'm sure you'll make an absolute fortune.
But after
for your missus?
The promotion, no, for me. But yeah, after you bigging me up about my breasts, I might consider it.
Yeah.
You know. What better promotion?
So what do you... I mean, obviously this week we've got big stories about Facebook coming up, but it's interesting. And I don't know if you read I believe they joined with a bunch of other nudist companies, and they've said basically... But they've sort of said that it affects people's mental health to not be able to reveal their bodies.
Yes. I mean, from the start, this is a war. I love the fact it's phrased a nudist war, which is, and this is, of course, metaphorical. If it was reality, I think I'd love to see this war when you just like McDonald's against the nudists. Sorry, not McDonald's. Facebook against the nudists would be McDonald's against the nudists. Another good one. You know, everyone against the nudists. What's happened is that Facebook have moved a little bit more to free speech, and then instantly nudists have gone right. This is our moment.
Here's my willy.
Yeah. It's discriminatory. The truth is, OK, I get a little bit of their angle is to say that we always show beautiful bodies all the time. We should show all kinds of bodies, but
you
really...
have to watch out for angles with nudists.
Yes, this is more about... I think it's more about exhibitionism, reading the article, than it is about any kind of free speech or free bodying, you know, so... I don't know, do you want to see more
it's an interesting one.
ugly
Plenty
bodies?
of flesh on social media, thank you very much. They're allowed to show as much as the most beautiful model in the world. What they're pushing for is very unreasonable. And it's not a free speech issue at all, is it? It's not speech that... They could describe it all they want. I don't think anyone would stop them doing that. It's the images.
It's the images, yes, indeed. And we've got some images now for you at home.
That's what we were all waiting for, Josh.
So we have some very surprising news. The global outbreak of common sense seems to have infected the civil service. 2 Whitehall departments have released new guidance that states there's no longer transphobic to express gender-critical beliefs. This comes after the settlement of an employment tribunal with former civil servant Eleanor Francis, who claims she was forced to resign due to her gender-critical beliefs. We are joined by employment and discrimination lawyer Peter Daly and Director of Advocacy at Sex Matters, Helen Joyce. Welcome, both of you.
Hi, Josh. Good to be here.
Congratulations. Now, Peter, could you just talk us through this case?
Eleanor came to me about 2 years ago. She was a civil servant at DCMS, and she explained to me that she was gender critical, and she felt that being gender critical put her at risk of losing her job or experiencing discrimination in the workplace. There was also a sequence of policies that came out of the civil service, one in particular, the gender identity and intersex policy, that said that a person can use whatever toilet that they feel most comfortable with, which would mean that male people would be in female toilets, and that anybody who raised a concern about that or raised a query about that was definitionally transphobic. So Eleanor did what all good civil servants should do. She went through all of the HR policies. She calmly, comprehensively set out why the way she was being treated and the policies that were being laid down to her were unlawful, and why they conflicted with the civil service duty of impartiality, which is kind of the core reason to have the civil service. At the end of all of that, she found herself in a position where her job had effectively been taken from her. She'd lost her responsibilities. She'd exhausted all of the internal procedures. So she had no alternative but to resign. We sued for constructive dismissal and discrimination on the basis of gender-critical belief and a philosophical belief in the impartiality of the civil service. And just before Christmas, about a year after we'd lodged the claim, the civil service agreed to settle the claim for the full value that we were seeking and to put in place a sequence of steps to try and correct where they had gone wrong. So all in all, Eleanor was extremely happy with the outcome, and it does seem to be a positive outcome for the civil service more generally.
Well, Helen, you at Sex Matters, you have uncovered, I believe, some documents showing how the civil service kind of got to this state, and they were implemented around 2014, 2015, is that right? But they read crazy when you read them in today's eye set.
Even earlier, I mean, for at least, I would say, 14, 15 years now, internal and external lobby groups have been promoting a version of the law that's just frankly not correct. So they've been telling civil servants in every department, and also senior civil servants at the top in the Cabinet Office, that you have to allow men who identify as women to use women's spaces, that anyone who says that, you know, men are male and women are female is a bigot, that if you refuse to use she, her for a man who identifies as a woman, that you would be disciplined, and so on. This has been going on really since about 2011 at least. And there have been a succession of policies and a succession of attempts to get them corrected. They've been withdrawn, there have been FOIs. I'll spare you the grim details. But where we've got to at the moment is that nobody is taking responsibility. This is the way it is across pretty much every government department. And of course, they're the people who are helping to push out policies across the country. I mean, the Eleanor is in DCMS, Culture, Media and Sport. And Culture, Media and Sport has not been doing the work that it should have been to stop men from identifying into women's sports. And we can't get the attention of the department to try to get this fixed across the country at large, rather than having to work by one sport at a time. So this is really significant, because it means that there's going to be sort of constructive work, hopefully across the whole civil service, to make a model policy, and that'll be lawful. And if it's not lawful, well, we'll just have to go back to court again, won't we, with a judicial review or similar, and get a decent policy finally across the whole civil service, and then out through the country at large.
Well, that's it. I mean, going back to court again, I believe you've worked on the on Maya Forstater. Where does this case sit within all the recent victories? Will this actually bring about change, do you think?
I hope
yeah,
so.
It's a step
I mean,
by step.
Yes.
Sorry, Peter.
I was to say, Peter. Yeah, sorry. This is,
Oh,
this is the, no. This is we're going to spend 2 hours now, just all being very polite. But we'll go to you. We'll go to you, Mr. Daly, and then we'll hear from Helen again.
Yeah, I think it does look positive, but we shall have to see where we get to on it. A judgment. This is a settled case. We don't have a judgment. We feel that we've held the civil services feet to the fire, and everything looks positive. And as far as it's possible to commit them to future action, I think we've done that. But it is up to them now to take steps. So we shall have to see where we get to on it. But there does seem to be a genuine realisation on their part that things cannot continue as they are. It's extremely unusual for the civil service to settle a claim for the full value of the claim at an early stage. It's also extremely unusual not to put confidentiality requirements in the settlement agreement. So those things do speak quite positively, but we'll have to see where we get to on it.
Well, Helen, this is just 2 departments, I believe, who have now promised to sort out their policies. Do you think? Have you seen any indication that that other departments are going to follow suit from this?
Well, we're certainly going to be writing to the Cabinet Office and the permanent secretaries across all departments, because if it's not lawful in DCMS, then it's not lawful in any department. And what we will be saying is that, you know, now you're on notice. If you have a policy that does not, that behaves the same way as the DCMS policy did, you are on notice. And there are other cases at the moment. So, for example, there's a case against that's to do with a woman called Elspeth Wrigley, who's at the Rural Payment Agency. The Rural Payment Agency is being sued by a trans-identifying man called Samantha Tempest, who is trying to take the Rural Payment Agency to court simply for allowing Elspeth to set up a group of civil servants who are gender critical. That's all. He's claiming that the group existing is transphobia and is discriminating against him. So he tried to keep his name secret, but there was a court judgment just a few days ago. Actually, it was before Christmas, but it came out a few days ago, saying that he can't keep his name secret. So, and that's not the only judgment about confidentiality, about trans people's names that has come out just in the last week. So we're really seeing a big change in the courts. So men who want to try and use women's spaces, and then when the women complain, and the men say, well, I want to keep my name secret, they're not getting away with it anymore.
Well, speaking of the courts, Peter, it seems like every victory has come through the courts, that the courts are the only thing that's kind of saved our country, even though we're in the middle of the process, from this dangerous gender ideology. And is there any point, do you think, politicians are going to step up, or is it the courts that allow them to be cowards, essentially, because they're just going to constantly just follow what the courts say at the end? So individuals like the person who brought this victory today has to then upend their life for 2-3 years.
It's obviously completely unacceptable that this should be left to individual women to, and it is almost exclusively women, individual women to have to, as you say, put their life on hold for 2 or 3 years and, open themselves up to huge risk. So there should be a much more political solution to it. But each of the victories do have an impact, and they do move things forward. I think the politicians are being cowards in it. I think they are just standing back and hoping that they can let the courts do the work for them. But these are fundamentally policy issues. The reason why these cases win so often, and I mean, it's remarkable how much the gender critical cases win. The reason why is because the law is actually very straightforward. The legal position in these cases is not complex. This is not really difficult law. The problem is that employers, particularly in the public sector and in the civil service in this case, overlook the law, and they try and pursue what they think is going beyond the law and doing something which is morally acceptable to them, but is unlawful. It is up to the politicians, I think, to take a step forward in policy and stick their head above the parapet and recognise that it's not up to individual women to have to bring these multiple legal cases to try and make clear what we all already know.
Yeah, well, Helen, have you actually seen any evidence of politicians stepping up at all to end this institutional capture?
Not on any side, I'm afraid. So Rishi Sunak said that he would change the law if he had become Prime Minister again after, in the last general election. But he had years to do that. He had years to fix it beforehand. He said he knew what a woman was, but he wasn't willing to change the law to really clarify that the Equality Act really means sex, male and female, when that's what it says. So he could have done it and he didn't. And Labour said that it's going to protect single-sex spaces. That's a manifesto commitment, but it claims that they are protected when these cases demonstrate that they aren't protected. So, yeah, what we're seeing is just politicians being politicians, really, on both sides, and leaving it to individual women like Eleanor. So thank goodness for them.
Yeah, well, we owe them gratitude. And the money that she got arguably is not going to replace, as I say, 2-3 years of stress and all the stuff that comes with it. So anyway, thank you to her, and thank you both of you for joining us this evening. Thank you. Just going to read out a statement. Susanna Story and Sarah Mumby, the permanent secretaries of the DCMS and DSIT, said our departments are working together to introduce a revised gender reassignment policy informed by a new central model policy, which we anticipate will be available by the end of the year. In accordance with the Equality Act of 2010, the revised policy will balance the rights of staff with different protected characteristics, including, but not limited to, gender reassignment, religion and belief and sex. Well, that is nice to read. It's just a shame they didn't had to be taken to the courts to bring it to fruition. Next on Free Speech Nation, the biggest education union in Europe wants to talk about Palestine in the classroom. I'll be joined by journalist Nicole Lamper to find out about the NEU's obsession with the Middle East. See you in 2 minutes.
Hello there, good evening. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. The forthcoming week is all about north to south contrast, and we'll see some of this becoming evident in the overnight period as well, because the winds are going to be picking up in the north with gales widely around coastal districts, and as a band of rain pushes its way into the northwest of Scotland, there'll be outbreaks of drizzle for Northern Ireland as well. Generally a drier and calmer night for England and Wales underneath some clearer spells, but with those clear skies around, temperatures will drop off, some patchy frost for eastern Wales, parts of southeastern England as well. So as you step out the door first thing on Monday morning, there will still be a chill in the air for these more central and southern areas. A touch of brightness is possible first thing, but generally it is going to be a largely cloudy day for the vast majority of us. We can see where that rain band is going to be sat at 7 a.m. in the morning, pushing into Northern Ireland with some heavier bursts possible over the hills of western Scotland as well. But just notice how much milder it is in the northwest to start off the morning, 10-11 degrees Celsius already there across the Highlands and the Outer Hebrides. This band of rain will slowly push its way southwards, eventually arriving into parts of Cumbria and northwestern Wales into the afternoon period. period. Elsewhere for England and Wales, it will manage to stay dry, but still relatively cloudy for all. Temperatures holding up at around 6 or 7 degrees Celsius here, which is roughly where we'd expect them to be for the time of year, but much milder for Northern Ireland and Scotland, widely into double-digit figures. On Tuesday, that frontal system that's bringing the rain will stall itself across more central areas of the UK, but it will also weaken. So the rain will become lighter and patchier. It will generally be drizzly outbreaks across some more western hills. Many of us will manage to stay dry. Still relatively cloudy for most, the best of the sunshine for the far south coast of England, but also some eastern areas of Scotland seeing a touch of brightness. But the north to south contrast will continue throughout the week, particularly in terms of temperatures. It is still going to be the northern areas that remain the mildest throughout. Bye-bye.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Union with me, Josh Howie. Now, Europe's largest teachers' union is weighing in on one particular cause, Palestine. The NEU subsidises 2 trips to the Palestinian territories a year, while its magazine frequently denounces Israel. And last July, the union even hosted an event in London called How to Talk About Palestine in Our Schools. We are joined now by the journalist Nicole Lampert, who wrote an article about the NEU's obsession with Palestine. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. So your article, you wrote it came out earlier this week, and it was shocking to me to read that level of focus that the NEU seems to have on this one particular issue.
The shocking thing was how closely aligned they are with the Palestinian Solidarity Committee. So I started off by looking at anti-Semitism in schools, which is a huge issue and something that this is just part of. To the point where quite a lot of Jewish parents that I spoke to have ended up having to take their children out of schools. But then I started to look, I spoke to quite a lot of teachers, and they said, we have a problem with our union. And what was surprising, and all the unions have a kind of Palestinian obsession, but how much the NEU does. And the NEU is possibly the most, in terms of radicalisation, the most dangerous union of all, because these are our children, this is young minds, and any dictator who wants to take over a country, they start with the schools, they start with the curriculum, which is why there are very strict rules on neutrality in this country and on politics. To me, looking at what the union's doing, these trips to Palestine, the Palestinian territories, and the only other place they go to is Cuba, interestingly enough.
It's nice and hot.
Yes, and Cuba's a place where they don't actually allow unions, interestingly. But the obsession with Palestine, they're so closely aligned that the head of the Palestinian Solidarity Committee, the chairwoman, also has an important role in the NEU. And she's not the only one. 4 out of 14 of the committee of the PSC also have important roles in the NEU.
So we should explain to people what the PSC is. I mean, I would argue it's an extremist organisation.
Yeah.
And so to find out that these are the people who are guiding our teachers, who are in turn guiding our students, it's a real problem. And have they been spoken to? I understand one of these teachers did approach the leadership and say, look, guys, can we sort this out, please, because this is not good.
The Jewish teachers have spoken to them. As you say, so there was one Jewish teacher, Peter Block, he's a retired teacher, and he stayed in the union knowing how dangerous it is and knowing that a lot of people who are still teaching are too frightened to speak out. So he spoke at their last big conference just before Easter, and he was booed and hissed. And they sang From the River to the Sea. These are teachers behaving like students, behaving like children. And to me, this is the radicalisation of teachers, and it's an aim of radicalising our children.
I mean, they literally are saying, this is how you bring this stuff into your classroom, and false maps. There was a case of a student, I believe the teacher said, who here is Jewish? Is that right?
Yeah, she said, who here is Jewish? And put your hand up. This is a class of 8-year-olds. And then when they put their hands up, and there were 2 of them that put their hand up, she said, I'm pro-Palestine, I'm free Palestine.
Yeah.
And even when teachers aren't necessarily on board with it, they don't know how to handle anti-Semitism, and they don't know how to handle the children that are coming in with Palestine badges, or even the teachers that are coming in with the Palestine badges. So at the start of all of this, there was some children in an area where they came in with Palestine badges. When they told them they're not part of our uniform, you have to take them off, then they had huge crowds of parents outside. So it's part of a larger radicalisation, but with the children. And one of the things that they agreed at conference was to circulate teaching material on the conflict, which of course will be one-sided. So
using terms like colonisation, I believe.
Yeah, and saying that the land was not ever Jewish, that the Palestinians are indigenous. And you might argue that perhaps they are, but you can't say that Jews aren't too.
Yeah. It's so, I mean, is anything being done here? I mean, you've highlighted it. What's been the response from your article then?
Very little, I'm afraid to say.
The indifference from politicians who are there to protect our kids?
I mean, I know that it's been sent to politicians. I haven't heard anything back from anybody. I know that the Jewish Board of Deputies have brought it up with the teaching minister. So people are aware of this, but what is being done? And, just, listening to your previous conversation about the kind of gender critical, these beliefs and how they've kind of infiltrated their way into the civil service and all these other areas. And it's the same with this radical pro-Palestine term. All of this is coming through via the unions. Yeah. And to me, perhaps even more dangerously, is that alongside that, there's also a view that they kind of accompanying it, that they want to try and get rid of prevent, which is the extremism. And particularly at a time when we're seeing lots of young people becoming more extreme, both with Islamism and in the far right. And the Teachings Union is working with people who are anti-prevent.
Yeah, so if they're actually doing it's sort of two-pronged. It's like we're actually going to teach children more extremist views. Yeah. At the same time, we're going to prevent the organisation that is actually trying to stop these extremist views.
It's so dangerous.
And I've got a bunch of Jewish friends who are teachers who have all left the NEU from stances over the last few years, from seeing it become more radicalised, because they got a new leader who is, and some of the things that he said at different marches. And I believe also they're sponsoring some of these protests, these pro-Palestinian protests, and so you'll see the NEU up there next to their logo, next to other organisations like Five Pillars.
Yeah, and Cage.
Cage, yeah.
Yeah, and they're speaking at these places. And yes, so the union leader, Daniel Kabidi, he's called for an intifada and then claimed he didn't know that it was...
globalise the intifada, which is, of course, we've literally seen that on the streets. Globalise the intifada is what happened in New Orleans the other week.
Exactly, and he said he didn't know it was about violence, but, he lived through the Second Intifada, where 1,000 Israelis were killed in violent terrorist attacks. What does he mean by that? And this is the leader of the union.
Yeah, so it's all... And then also, as you say, I have friends as well. I know you have kids who, around that age. My kids are at a Jewish school, but I have friends who've had some real issues here. And you look to the teachers as leadership to sort of protect against these kind of extremist views, or at least to be impartial. And that is probably the most frustrating thing, is that we are trusting our children to these people, and they are meant to be, at the very least, impartial.
Yeah.
And this is clear evidence of them not being so.
Yeah, and even if they're not impartial in their private lives, they shouldn't be taking it into the classroom. Whereas at the NEU conference, they openly said, you know, we wear our pro-Palestine badges, we wear our watermelons. You know, for those who don't know, it's a kind of secret signal. We're pro-Palestine because the watermelon colours are the same as the Palestine flag. So they're doing all of this, and they're saying it openly, and they're saying, we know that it might get the school in trouble, but we don't care. And it's almost like that, you know, they want to push it as far as they can, and they are pushing it, and they are getting away with it. It's the point where we've now got teachers who are, they're being told about anti-Semitism, head teachers, and they refuse to teach the children about what anti-Semitism is because they're so scared, because even that has become politicised.
And you have also things like, I believe, the walkouts, and I believe there was the children, you know, teachers were going to be taking children on these kind of walkouts, on these protests.
Yeah, well, they did
last year, but some still went on with it.
Yeah, well, last year, in 2023, there were walkouts, and quite a few teachers did take their children out of school, and they at lunchtime, and they were given microphones, and they were singing From the River to the Sea and things like that. Just before it happened this year, then the education minister did send out a note reminding everybody of neutrality, and I think that did go around. But, for example, one Jewish teacher that I spoke to, and this is just one, she said, you know, in the office the day before, there were loads of pro-Palestine placards that had been printed out.
To be honest, it's a little bit scary. It's scary for our kids, most of all. Well, thank you for drawing attention to it. I don't know what the next step is, but at least people are now more aware of what's going on. We'll see. The NEU said it has condemned without equivocation the actions of Hamas on October 7th, adding the call for a ceasefire is now imperative in the face of the destruction and loss of life in Gaza. It is legitimate for the NEU to speak out alongside bodies such as the TUC and the UN to stand up for the urgent protection of children and teachers in Palestine. Well, thank you so much for coming in. Next on Free Speech Nation, are the changes that matter a well-deserved victory for free speech? I'll be joined by the director of the think tank Social Market Foundation, Theo Bertram. See you in 2 minutes.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
If you're about to jet off to the Mediterranean for some winter sun, then west is certainly best at this time. It's high pressure that's in charge across parts of Iberia into southern France to provide relatively fine conditions at the moment, but further towards Italy and around the Adriatic towards Turkey as well, we've currently got some heavy rain, even heavy snowfall across inland areas. This will be continuing over the next couple of days or so, but is expected to ease during the forthcoming week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
I'm Nana Acquia. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we're going to introduce you to Liam Wildish. Liam, well, I'd like to think he's a friend of mine because I follow him on Instagram, on TikTok there as well.
You're a big fan, aren't you?
Big fan, because there's what he does. He's a cleaner. He cleans signs. But the thing is, he's not employed by councils or whatever. He does this voluntarily. And you sort of think to yourself, well, who cleans these signs? Why have these signs been allowed to get into this terrible state of disrepair and filthiness?
So basically, long story short, about 6 years ago, I used to be a window cleaner. In the community where I lived, I noticed all of the road signs were filthy, and I was perfectly equipped to clean them. So basically, I cleaned the road signs as a bit of a thank you to the community and sort of make a little bit of awareness of my window cleaning business at the time. Yeah. Sort of cleans up the area, makes the road safer, and that's kind of how that started. And people found it like a really satisfying sort of approach. So that sort of led on to today of a video in cleaning the dirty road signs and making sort of satisfying content with it as well.
What is the equipment? What have we got here?
So this is a water-fed pole system connected to a backpack, which is what feeds the water through the end of the brush there. It's perfectly equipped to basically remove this green dirty, it's like a mildew build-up that you get on the signs. Yeah. As you can see, this is like extremely effective at removing so.
So GB News viewers, if they spot a particularly grisly sign in their area, then they can get in touch.
They can do, yeah.
And Liam Wildish, the sign guy, can sort you out.
if you find Liam, the sign guy, online, drop me a message, let me know, and I'll add you to my list of places.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Mark Zuckerberg has updated his social media empire's moderation rules, unwinding years of restrictions around what the platform has defined as hate speech. Meta has overhauled its hateful conduct policy to allow certain contexts, such as allegations of mental illness based on gender or sexual orientation, as well as non-serious abuse related to sexuality. Joining me now is the director of the think tank Social Market Foundation, Theo Bertram. Theo, welcome to the show.
Hi, Josh. Thanks very much for having me.
Absolute pleasure. So, I mean, how big a deal do you think this is?
I think this is a huge deal. I mean, for most of the last 20 years, the pattern of big tech has been ever greater safety, hiring more and more people to take down more and more content. And that's also been the direction of our legislation in most countries, especially in Europe. And now what we're seeing is a change in direction, back away from safety, along towards greater freedom of speech. So I think that is a significant change.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people out there going, oh, it's because Trump got in. I'm sure, of course, they're related. But the focus seems to be from some people on why Zuckerberg has made this decision as opposed to the implications for it. And surely that's more important, isn't it? Less censorship?
Yeah, I think if you look at what is actually changing, so it might be worth just explaining sort of a bit about what's been happening so far. So let me give you 3 examples, and I think it explains why they're doing what they're doing. So one example of what would be fact-checked is during the start of the war with Russia, there was a lot of rumours that there were nuclear weapons in Ukraine funded by the Americans, and this was all being spread by the Russians. Now, the fact checkers looked at that and they said, actually, the truth is the Americans are paying to decommission old nuclear sites. So that was a helpful fact check. We know that's now true, so we'll remove everything that says that make that false allegation. So that's one example. Another example would be during COVID saying you could inject yourself with a disinfectant as a form of treating yourself, which was something that Trump said sort of offhandedly, but is obviously fact-checkable as provably wrong. And under the old rules means that that would have been removed everywhere. And then another example would be saying that the 2020 election in the US was stolen or rigged, which it provably wasn't, but becomes very difficult for the tech companies when that's an accepted fact, not just because Trump says it, but because so many Americans believe it as well. So I think there's a couple of different factors here. One is it's a really difficult job to do this fact checking, and in some ways it's easier just to let the crowd decide. And the other thing is, politically, it's got really hard for the tech companies when you've got a country as divided as America, for the tech companies to be trying to play the referee in that role. And they've got to the point where they've said, we just won't do this anymore. Look, you can make up your own mind. You can hear what Trump says. You can hear what his opponents say, and you can try and make your mind up for yourself.
Yeah, well, I mean, some people saying, oh, it's the end of facts. But arguably under this old regime anyway, another example would be that if you went on Facebook and said there are only two sexes, you would be censored for arguably a fact. So now that they're pushing this out and going down the route of X, which is to have these kind of community notes where it does come down to a wider group of people rather than a few select people saying, no, this is right or wrong according to whatever their ideology is, will that bring us closer to the truth, do you think?
Well, actually, I don't think it will quite be the change in the way that you're describing. It's possible that might be one of them, but really those sort of things are set by the platform's rules. The idea of the fact checkers is where something is in the grey, in the border zone, and so where the platforms then say, we're going to bring in a third-party expert to advise us on this. Now, sometimes that they may mean they bring in a third-party expert on an issue like the one that you described, but typically that will probably be more in the platform's own guidelines. This is about bringing in another third party under that guise of then being seen as objective. Now, that is going to mean, it's going to mean both. It's going to mean that we lose a lot of factual content online. It's going to get a lot harder to be able to tell what is accurate or what is not. But what we get with that is much more political freedom of speech. And so that is a change. Whether you see that as good or bad, it's probably a mix.
OK, well, I argue that it's going to be more free speech, but we're going to have to get better at finding our facts. Thank you so much for joining us. That's the end of the first hour in Free Speech Nation. See you in a second, guys.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. The forthcoming week is all about north to south contrast, and we'll see some of this becoming evident in the overnight period as well, because the winds are going to be picking up in the north with gales widely around coastal districts, and as a band of rain pushes its way into the northwest of Scotland, there'll be outbreaks of drizzle for Northern Ireland as well. Generally a drier and calmer night for England and Wales underneath some clearer spells, but with those clear skies around, temperatures will drop off. Some patchy frost for eastern Wales, parts of southeastern England as well. So as you step out the door first thing on Monday morning, there will still be a chill in the air for these more central and southern areas. A touch of brightness is possible first thing, but generally it is going to be a largely cloudy day for the vast majority of us. We can see where that rain band is going to be sat at 7 a.m. in the morning, pushing into Northern Ireland with some heavier bursts possible over the hills of western Scotland as well. But just notice how much milder it is in the northwest to start off the morning, 10, 11 degrees Celsius already there across the Highlands and the Outer Hebrides. This band of rain will slowly push its way southwards, eventually arriving into parts of Cumbria and northwestern Wales into the afternoon period. Elsewhere for England and Wales, it will manage to stay dry, but still relatively cloudy for all. Temperatures holding up at around 6 or 7 degrees Celsius here, which is roughly where we'd expect them to be for the time of year, but much milder for Northern Ireland and Scotland, widely into double-digit figures. On Tuesday, that frontal system that's bringing the rain will stall itself across more central areas of the UK, but it will also weaken. So the rain will become lighter and patchier. It will generally be drizzly outbreaks across some more western hills. Many of us will manage to stay dry. Still relatively cloudy for most, the best of the sunshine for the far south coast of England, but also some eastern areas of Scotland seeing a touch of brightness. But the north to south contrast will continue throughout the week, particularly in terms of temperatures. It is still going to be the northern areas that remain the mildest throughout. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever, an incredible £50,000. That's tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this year. What would you spend it on? £50,000 could buy those treats you've always dreamed of having. And just one entry into the Great British Giveaway really could make £50,000 cash all yours. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5. £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Should we talk about the weather?
Yes.
Because apparently, all of this weather is leading to bunk-off Monday, Dawn.
Yeah, this is the front page of the Daily Star, which is a very attractive picture of a potato on a couch. So everyone...
As if we haven't done enough of that over the last...
Everyone working from home today, hope you're having a nice time, because we're obviously not. Yeah, so sickies will double today. Bunk-off Monday. Millions of workers call in ill to avoid the snow. Now, obviously, for many people, it's the first day back after the Christmas and New Year break as well. Many people have had 2 weeks off. And the weather gives you a bit of an excuse to maybe extend that break. Now, look, don't get me wrong, up in the north it is terribly bad, and we had airports shut at the weekend, football games being potentially called off, etc., and it was awful. However, in many parts of the country, certainly in London and the South East, it's just rain. There's just puddles out there, people.
There's no excuse.
Just go to work.
Down here.
And the security guy said he can't work from home. He can't work from home. He's got to come in, isn't he?
Well, there are so many. It does tend to be the working class jobs as well, the ones that you can't do from home. The people running the supermarkets, the people running the NHS, you know, the people, the postmen, the dustbin people. I mean, all these people are the ones that have to get out there no matter what the weather and get on with it.
Yeah, exactly that.
So it's all these, you know, and we had stories over the other day, didn't we, about people working from home from a beach in Ibiza.
Exactly.
From Barbados. People working for local councils.
Yeah, I've got a few friends in corporate jobs today who've got the week off work.
Oh, dears.
And if you're affected by the weather over the week?
No, not at all. Well, yes. My golf was cancelled yesterday.
Oh, my God! How did you...
Snowfall, my golf was cancelled. The mighty Woburn couldn't get it out there. Oh, can you believe it?
What? Oh,
otherwise,
honestly,
no.
how did you...
Love them. My grandkids love the weather.
GB News, the People's Channel.
There's plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation this week, but first let's get an update from Will Hollis.
Thank you, Josh. Your top story at 8 o'clock. Health Secretary Wes Streeting has described nurses as the backbone of our NHS after a staff member was left in a critical condition by a stabbing in a hospital's A&E department. The trust that oversees the Royal Oldham Hospital has said it is shocked and saddened by the attack which took place yesterday. A 37-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. The woman, who's in her 50s, suffered serious injuries and remains in hospital for treatment. Officials in Los Angeles say they're prepared for the next round of high winds, which could fan blazes. Despite strained services, they say fire hydrants, which failed earlier in the week, are ready for use. At least 16 people have been killed and thousands evacuated as fires rage on in California.
Today, strong north to northeast winds gusts are up to 50 miles per hour with low humidity will be observed. A red flag warning is in effect and will remain until 6 p.m. Wednesday evening.
Back here, Nigel Farage has accused the Health Secretary of attempting to conceal the reality of the grooming gangs after he claimed the public discourse risks vilifying certain communities. Wes Streeting had said the rhetoric around grooming gangs risked causing a second New Zealand mosque massacre. Mr Farage told the Telegraph newspaper that his remarks were insulting. That's now as Labour MP Dan Carden has broken ranks from Sir Keir Starmer, joining Andy Burnham in his calls for a national inquiry into the scandal. An off-duty policewoman who was killed by a lorry as she helped at the scene of a crash epitomises the very best of British policing, a senior officer has said. PC Rosie Pryor was standing on the verge of the A19 at Bagby near Thirsk with the driver and passenger of one of the cars involved when the lorry collided with them yesterday morning. Miss Pryor and 41-year-old Ryan Welford from Knaresborough both died at the scene. The 65-year-old lorry driver was arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. He's been released under investigation. A teenage boy who was a passenger in Mr. Welford's car is in a serious but stable condition. The UK Health Security Agency has extended its cold weather health alert for all of England until Tuesday. Amber alerts will now run until January the 14th, meaning a rise in deaths, particularly among those aged 65 and over or with health conditions, is likely. Temperatures dropped to minus 13.9 degrees overnight, but the Met Office has said the cold spell is coming to an end. Those are your latest headlines. Let's get you back to Free Speech Nation.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howie, and I'm joined by my panel of Cressida Wetton and Kerry Marks. We're going to go straight to some questions from our audience. Our first question is from Luke.
Good evening, guys. What the heck is happening at the Royal Society of Literature?
Well, indeed. And by the way, Luke, I like your badge.
Thank you.
Very much so. I've still got my Dennis the Menace. But, should explain to people that's from Free Speech Union.
It is,
right?
yes.
Very good. Well, excellent. So this is the leaders of the Royal Society of Literature have quite an explosive row, I guess, including they offered Salman Rushdie only lukewarm support. Now it seems two of the leaders quitting. Are you familiar with the Royal Society of Literature?
Somewhat. I mean, it's supposed to be kind of like the gold standard of literature, as all Royal Societies are. But, I mean, there has been some dumbing down recently for the sake of diversity and equality, and it should be, as all the Royal Societies should be, a meritocracy.
Yes, well, exactly this. So, Cressida, there are two issues that come out. One, exactly as Luke says here, I believe it used to be to get in you had to have 2 books of outstanding work, and they basically took that away. And also the other thing is them not standing up for free speech for writers.
For Salman Rushdie, if you said lukewarm support, I would argue no support. If you say no, we need to remain neutral, that's really no support at all.
Neutral against people getting stabbed in the face.
Oh, and Salman Rushdie tweeted them and said, "Oh, just to check in, do you feel neutral about attempted murder?" I don't know if they responded to that. I mean, it's supposed to be elitist, isn't it? That's the whole point. They're being accused of being elitist. And you think, well, I should think they should be. Yes, but things are being dumbed down. And, of course, it's always the same thing. We get told that diversity doesn't affect quality, but it inevitably does. It's one or the other, isn't it? You can't say we're a diverse, inclusive organisation at the top, we want to include more people, and then try and tell me that every single person involved is there on merit. It can't be both at the same time.
Yeah, so this is... do you think they've kind of given up? Is that why they're leaving?
I think Luke put it really well, and he's obviously after our jobs. Yeah, look, I think they took the DEI, and it should be a meritocracy, of course it should. Whatever happened to meritocracy? And so they took the DEI ideology a bit literally, which is obviously their thing. And yes, it reached the point where you don't have to produce 2 outstanding works to be nominated. I think it's come down to you didn't need to be able to be joined up. And we've seen this across the board, haven't we, with the armies, where it was you have to do like 20 pull-ups, then suddenly it was like, if you can say the word pull-up, you're in, get in. And yes, they've really become wishy-washy in the whole Salman Rushdie thing. I agree, it's an absolute demonstration of this, where they could have stepped up and shown an actual real opinion. They just couldn't be bothered or didn't want to risk it. So they left it for several days. So, but apparently they're at a civil war now because everyone's at war. It was the nudists just a few minutes ago, and now it's the literary people. So at least we'll get some good write-ups on it.
We'll find out. Our next question is from Melvin.
Hi. Why do you think Mark Rylance and other people wish to protest outside synagogues?
Yes, Mark Rylance from Wolf Hall, actor, and I believe a lot of MPs, about 150 people have signed a letter, an open letter condemning the Met's decision to ban a march by the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, who we've heard about earlier. We know each other because we sometimes stand at the counter-protests, which are quite horrific affairs of hate coming our way. What do you think about this, though?
I think it might be. I'm just putting a couple of ideas out there. It might be that they're anti-Semitic. I don't know.
That's just crazy talk.
I know.
There's a balance here to be had. Now, I've talked about this story through the weekend. There's a balance of rights in that Jews being able to pray in peace at synagogue and people to protest. So, personally, I'm not calling for these protests for protests in general to be banned, just to be moved. And this is the one thing that no one can explain to me. And I'd just like to bring up a little map here of... So this is where... There's the synagogue behind the top arrow, and there's the BBC. So they want to protest outside the BBC. That's fair enough. I've protested outside the BBC. But the one thing that no one is being able to answer who wants this protest to happen is why can't you just shift it a few hours later or start at Westminster, end up at the BBC, in which case all the Jewish people at the synagogue close by will have gone home, or do it any time on Sunday?
Well, I suppose it's for maximum impact, isn't it? Would be.
But why Saturday morning at 9 o'clock and then meeting there, as opposed to Saturday at 1 o'clock or Saturday? I don't know if that's really the impact.
Well, I don't know, but what you're highlighting is the problem. This is the crux of the issue, isn't it? Who wins? Whose right trumps whose? And this is this as a wider topic. This is ongoing in our society a lot at the moment, isn't it?
But you think that that Jewish people have a right to assemble in synagogue without having to walk through screaming people calling for the genocide of Jews and to be able to pray without hearing it all in the background?
I'm all free speech. I'm all right to demonstrate and so on, but this is intimidating and it's deliberate. It's to me, unquestionably deliberate. It's very easy to take a different route and still make exactly the same comments that you want to do and so on. And also, who's the leader of them that you were arguing with him the other day on?
I don't think he's a leader, but yes, Steve Hadley, I think.
Oh right, and he was saying, when have we been intimidating? When have we been aggressive? And during the interview, he was yelling at you that you're not a real Jew.
Yeah.
It was, to me, mind-blowing.
And also with other people, he shouted at Jewish people, that they killed babies. He said, when are you going to kill babies? And also, there was a JW3, which is a Jewish cultural centre.
Sure.
And the same people there outside, they're protesting and asking the same questions, the same rhetoric. And there's this horrible footage of this old Jewish woman crying her eyes out. Of course it's intimidation.
Yeah, and he also wants to talk about, to him, a real Jew is someone who agrees with him. You know, that's what it's always been, though. There's always been the real Jews. The Nazis had their real Jews, the ones who agreed with them. It's not something that's just started. And that happens. And also, there's people who disagree. And, there's black people who don't agree with other black people, gay people who don't agree with other gay people. That's allowed. People find it extraordinary that all Jews don't speak as one single voice. But actually, what is extraordinary is that 90% of Jewish people are Zionists or believe in the right for the state of Israel to exist, which everyone really is. Everyone is, really. If you ask Muslims whether they think that the whole of the Islamic world should exist, they'll say yes, it should. Of course, they are their version of Zionists, and for Zionists, it's just one tiny piece of land, which is too much for these people, and they want to get rid of it. They'll do everything they can.
Well,
so, no.
Kerry, you speak for me. Thank you. Our next question is from John. Hey, John.
Should someone have been dismissed for showing a Telegraph cartoon?
Yes, this Telegraph cartoon. So this is housing officer Saba Porsaidi, who was sacked after sharing a cartoon from the Telegraph cartoonist Matt. It's a little bit more complicated than that. This is the actual cartoon. Do you see anything wrong with this, John? It's basically a joke on the Telegraph changing if it was taken over by an Islamic country.
Well, I don't find it... I don't see anything wrong with it. But then that's just my take on it.
Yeah, OK, no, absolutely, fair enough. I mean, what about you guys? Do you think... I mean, the fuller story is that this is a housing officer. He was... It's not just this cartoon. I believe he also was standing for reform.
Involved with reform. And
yeah,
I think
that was it. That was the gist
quite
of it,
an important part of the story, isn't it?
Yeah, and that they then turned around to him and said, no, you can't work for us because we have immigrants coming into these housing associations, which is ridiculous. Reform, even though I don't vote reform, but they're not anti-immigrants. They pro-controlled immigration.
Yeah, if you were an immigrant who had come through the appropriate channels, you might be very pro-reform because you want your legitimacy to be preserved. So that's what this is really about, isn't it? I don't think the cartoon's that significant.
Well, it's definitely, it was used as an example as to why this person, you know, the fact he'd shared it on social media was like, oh my God, it's racist, or...
Yes, but I think, didn't they come back, the authority he worked for, and they actually referred to his work for reform and said that doesn't fit with
it was all together, like, using
right,
this in the reply.
so, you know, yeah.
It's, I mean, it's great. I mean,
the implication is, oh, he's shared something outrageous, but I don't think that's really what it's about. It's about his values not aligning with theirs.
Yeah, but using that cartoon, which is arguably a very sort of meek cartoon, as some sort of example of how outrageous his opinions are, I think that's a problem. And more than that, of course, that you're seeing local government, or these authorities actually, having this kind of influence that wrong think will mean you cannot work for us.
He liked a cartoon from a national paper, and he's a member of is he actually a member of Reform?
I think he's standing up for Reform,
which is a national party. That's one of the parties in our country. Totally legitimate. Doesn't matter whether you support them or not. And also, he wasn't accepted for a job sorting out mould. like the mould's going to be offended or something. And I'm wondering whether the Housing Association run all the people they saw housing for as well through this test. Like, if you support Reform, where you laughed at a cartoon, therefore unlucky you don't get a house. What nutty world are we in?
It's crazy. Well, I believe that he's launched... he's taken this to court with the help of the Free Speech Union, so that's what that badge helped to pay for. Good. Our final question is an email from Andrew D. in Arizona. Woo! Yeehaw. Why were 2 children expelled from an Austrian nursery? This is referencing a kindergarten in Austria, which expelled 2 children after their parents complained about graphic sexual posters depicting trans men, amongst other things. There is a picture of the poster. There are bits that are blacked out, including a willy from someone who's clearly got breasts, so I'm assuming that's a trans man. But there's also adults which are showering with children. So this is, I think, very concerning
the reason
stuff.
the children had to leave was because of their bigoted parents
coming in and saying,
expressing concerns about this. That's what happened.
But it's crazy, and I believe that one of the people, not only have they been banned from this nursery, they've also been banned from, they've been blacklisted from 90 other nurseries that are associated with it. Yeah.
Wow.
This is it. So, I mean, is it bigotry to care that your 4-year-old should have been seeing this kind of imagery? Because the arguments are, this is a book, by the way, that came out worldwide, but the American version actually doesn't contain some of the graphic images that the German version does, which are even more extreme. And so this surely is sort of saying to kids, like, hey, look at these bodies, it's sexualising children. I believe even...
Did they have the black marks on the original thing? Was that just for our benefit?
Yeah, that's right.
So we have it taken away, but the 4-year-olds can cope.
Yeah, 4-year-olds are totally... But that's what they're trying to do. And people will say that you're literally indoctrinating within these tiny children this kind of... the normalisation of it, but also the sexualisation of kids. And I believe one of the people who's involved in sort of saying that this is all right in Austria actually brought out a report saying, no, it's totally natural for 1-year-olds to be sexual beings.
Yeah,
that for me is like red flag stuff.
Yeah, I think they actually said that that children are born sexual as sexual beings, which is a bizarre thing to say. I mean, that's something that develops a bit later on, and they have zero awareness of for most of their childhood. Right?
But it feels like they're trying to force this awareness onto them.
Yes, totally. And I believe it was the children that were banned rather than the parents, by the way, because they were banned first. The parents are banned as a result of the children being banned because the parents complained, which seems really unfair.
I mean, it's disturbing. I've got little kids, and supposedly the 4-year-old got home to his parents and said, I've just seen some weird pictures on the classroom wall, and the dad went in and went, what on earth is going on?
I'm always suspicious of any movement that needs to play on little children and get them involved in the ideology, as this one is doing, and as we've seen quite a lot, really.
Well, this is it. I mean, this has been a long-time thing, and we've also seen how some of what we call gender ideology now actually was started by people pushing the sexualisation of children.
Absolutely, and I don't know where they are in Austria. I'm just not up to date. I know in France they didn't have the caste review as soon as we did, so I don't know whether the UK is a bit further ahead on this stuff.
I think we are,
because this story feels a bit out of date to me by UK standards. Maybe I'm wrong. Someone's going to tell me as an example what happened last week.
But yeah, well, anyway, I think some hard drives need to be searched, personally. Next on Free Speech Nation, after Justin Trudeau resigned as Prime Minister for Canada, we'll discuss how the country fell out of love with him. See you in a couple of minutes.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Look, if people want to do veganuary, that's all well and good, but it shouldn't be forced on people, should it? Or even strongly suggested by something like the NHS?
It's not being forced on anybody. People can choose in the Wirral or any other NH trust that gets involved whether they want to partake or not. What they're doing are promoting the benefits of a vegan diet. Now, you imagine you're the NHS trust. You've got one person dying every 3 minutes from heart disease, and vegans get much less high blood pressure, much less heart disease than do meat eaters. So surely, if your job is to promote health, then you should let people know these kind of stats. Vegans get less cancer. Red meat is a class 1 carcinogen, classed by the World Health Organization as processed meat definitely causes cancer of the bowel. So it's just letting people know what the health advantages are of reducing or taking meat completely out of your diet and becoming vegan. You get less diabetes type 2, which is a big problem in the UK, less deaths from stroke, and around 1/5 less of all cancers. Imagine it was drugs that had that kind of impact. People would be hailing it and going, wow, this is amazing.
To call it about diversity and inclusion, I just think that's a load of nonsense. This is a move away by public bodies from this compulsory veganism. Look, your speaker from Viva, which is a very hardline animal rights organisation, attempts to talk about the environment and other issues, but really this to them is about animal rights. They don't believe in a world where we should use animals. I completely disagree with the speaker. I respect her right to say that, of course, but I completely disagree. And that's why the NHS and public bodies just shouldn't be getting involved in things that are so controversial.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Josh Howie. This week, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced he was stepping down after 9 years. It came after 3 votes of confidence and growing pressure for him to stand aside from those in his Liberal Party. Approval ratings had sunk from 65% in 2017 to 22% last month, while disapproving ratings ended up in the 70s. So why has Canada fallen out of love with Mr. Trudeau? Rupa Subramanya, the writer for the Free Press, joins me now to tell me. Hello, welcome very much to the show. So, did you see this coming?
100%. You'd have to be blind or have your head, stuck in the sand to not see this. Happen. I'm just surprised that it took this long for Trudeau's popularity to tank, and which eventually led to his resignation. But he was essentially forced out by his own party, and it was precipitated by the resignation of his very loyal lieutenant, the former finance minister and deputy prime minister, Chrystia Freeland, who resigned in this very dramatic fashion just a few hours before the fall economic statement was, she was expected to deliver this. And she resigned. She announced her resignation by writing an incredibly scathing letter damning Trudeau's populist gimmicks and really being ready to deal with Trump. And after months of resisting calls from within his party to resign and step aside and allow a new leader to take leadership of the Liberal Party, this created a crisis, and his parliamentary caucus eventually forced him out.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, he is expected, or the party is expected to lose quite heavily, right, to Pierre Poilievre. Is that right? So him stepping down has kind of it's damaged the party, leaving it so late. Kind of what the Democrats did in America, leaving it all too late.
Absolutely. So it's not just Trudeau's popularity that is in the doldrums. It's the economy. GDP per capita in Canada has stagnated for 9 consecutive quarters. We've allowed millions of immigrants into this country. We've taken in far more than the country can absorb. There's an affordability and housing crisis in Canada that has basically priced young professionals out of the market. Socialized medicine and education in Canada are basically falling apart. Trudeau has a lot, deserves a lot of the blame, as leader of, as Prime Minister of Canada for the last 9.5 years or so. But I also do want to make the point here that this is a moment of introspection, not just for the Liberal Party and Justin Trudeau, but it is also for the many Canadians who supported him this whole time till things just got to the point where they couldn't afford to buy a house and where the system around them was essentially collapsing. I want to point this out to you that, more than a year after Justin Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act to crush the peaceful truckers' protest, which was a protest that descended on Ottawa to protest against government overreach and the vaccine mandates and lockdowns, Trudeau invoked draconian authoritarian measures to crush this protest, and his finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, froze the bank accounts of some of these protesters. So even if you were a grandmother who donated $50 to the protest, you were suddenly frozen out of your bank account. The point is that more than a year later, almost 44% of Canadians strongly supported Trudeau's draconian measures. And so the point is, you can get a different leader now who might be able to make a difference at the margin as far as the economic situation is concerned. But fundamentally, Canadians have themselves been complicit in this country's decline. And this should be a moment of introspection for them, especially when Trump has been trolling Canadians and Justin Trudeau, saying that Canada should be the 51st state. And it's really thrown the Canadian identity it's facing an existential crisis as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I think Canadians, certainly over here in the UK, there's this idea of Canadians being sort of very easygoing. And do you think that might be why some of this cultural stuff went so far? Because people weren't necessarily aware of the issues. Certainly things like, as we've seen, the adoption of people being able to essentially kill themselves now, and then people not actually kind of really knowing what that entailed.
Yeah, absolutely. These things were happening as Canadians. Let's remember, Justin Trudeau has won 3 elections. Yes, we can quibble over whether he won the popular vote or not. That's not the point. In our Westminster style of democracy, he legitimately won 3 elections, and Canadians have to ask themselves, well, why did that happen? How did that happen? And while you mentioned medical assistance in dying, there's a fentanyl crisis in this country. There's lawlessness in this country. The rule of law is no longer being upheld as it should be in a functioning democracy like Canada, in a functioning law-governed society like Canada. But that's gone out for a toss. So we've come to a point where we're in a very dystopian place in Canada right now, where things are just falling apart around us, and no one really is asking the tough questions of how did we get to this point.
That's interesting, because you had people like Jacinda Ardern, Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland, who are, and arguably Justin Trudeau is kind of like the poster boy of this kind of woke ideology, or regressive progressives, as I call it. But you don't think necessarily that his leaving is as much to do with the rejection of this kind of ideology, then?
No, I'm very hesitant to come to that conclusion. I'd like to, but here's a great example of this. The Americans, especially since Trump won re-election, won the most recent election, are actually moving away from the moving away from DEI and wokeism and gender ideology and a whole host of other things. Whereas here we're doubling down on it. It is part of. It's now become the part, it's become part of the system. It's essentially part of the DNA of this country at this point. And we're not having serious conversations about, about whether DEI and wokeism should define Canadian society.
You don't think that the Conservatives getting in will change that, though?
No, I don't think so, because I think the support for wokeism and DEI and all of these progressive, regressive policies, whatever you want to call them, I think people still, I probably support. I haven't seen any polls to indicate that, but my sense is that I think people are just tired of the economic malaise in this country. They're just tired of not being able to, make ends meet, and so perhaps that's why they've soured on Trudeau. I don't think it's a rejection of Trudeau's progressive policies at all.
Wow, that's very interesting. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Very interesting to hear your opinions. Rupa Subramanyanya. No, is that right? Subramanya. Please, let's do a round of applause. I thought she was fantastic. That was so interesting. Next on Free Speech Nation, a top American attorney joins me to talk about a teacher who took on her school after she was sacked for not using the right pronouns and won. Back in a moment.
Hello there, good evening. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. The forthcoming week is all about north to south contrast, and we'll see some of this becoming evident in the overnight period as well, because the winds are going to be picking up in the north with gales widely around coastal districts, and as a band of rain pushes its way into the northwest of Scotland, there'll be outbreaks of drizzle for Northern Ireland as well. Generally a drier and calmer night for England and Wales underneath some clearer spells, but with those clear skies around, temperatures will drop off. Some patchy frost for eastern Wales, parts of southeastern England as well. So as you step out the door first thing on Monday morning, there will still be a chill in the air for these more central and southern areas. A touch of brightness is possible first thing, but generally it is going to be a largely cloudy day for the vast majority of us. We can see where that rain band is going to be sat at 7 a.m. in the morning, pushing into Northern Ireland with some heavier bursts possible over the hills of Western Scotland as well. But just notice how much milder it is in the northwest to start off the morning, 10, 11 degrees Celsius already there across the Highlands and the Outer Hebrides. This band of rain will slowly push its way southwards, eventually arriving into parts of Cumbria and northwestern Wales into the afternoon period. Elsewhere for England and Wales, it will manage to stay dry, but still relatively cloudy for all. Temperatures holding up at around 6 or 7 degrees Celsius here, which is roughly where we'd expect them to be for the time of year, but much milder for Northern Ireland and Scotland, widely into double-digit figures. On Tuesday, that frontal system that's bringing the rain will stall itself across more central areas of the UK, but it will also weaken. So the rain will become lighter and patchier. It will generally be drizzly outbreaks across some more western hills. Many of us will manage to stay dry. Still relatively cloudy for most, the best of the sunshine for the far south coast of England, but also some eastern areas of Scotland seeing a touch of brightness. But the north to south contrast will continue throughout the week, particularly in terms of temperatures. It is still going to be the northern areas that remain the mildest throughout. Bye-bye.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. A teacher in America has won a $450,000 or £362,000 payout after she refused to use a trans student's pronouns and was told to resign. Vivian Gerety successfully sued the Jackson local school district, saying her First Amendment claims were violated. We are joined now by American attorney Kara Dansky. Kara, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much.
Well, absolute pleasure to have you. So is this a big story in America, this kind of victory in the courts?
Well, unfortunately, in America, we have a media that refuses to have honest conversations about these kinds of topics. So no.
We have that here, by the way, as well.
I know you do. So I have a Substack and I have a weekly series called FFS Friday, which stands for Female Free Speech. And I profiled her in my FFS Friday series. And I'm so happy to hear that she has won her case, and I congratulate her.
So we've won some cases in the UK recently to do with very similar ideas. Do you think that that's going to have the same kind of implication legally? Because that's what we've seen in the UK, is it's through the courts that protections on free speech have actually been enabled. Does that mean now it's going to lead to some change in policy in America?
I do think that's correct. We have seen a number of cases. There's one case from the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals in which a bunch of students and parents sued, claiming that the school was mandating that students use preferred pronouns and whatnot. They prevailed before the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. There's another case that happened in the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals where a state university professor essentially made the same allegations. He prevailed before the 6th Circuit Court of Appeals. So I really think the free speech aspect of the whole topic of so-called gender identity ideology is a winner for those of us who care about free speech and about material reality.
Also, it sounds like a bunch of people are winning a whole load of dosh. Sounds like there could be a good thing, become a teacher and just say, no, I'm not going to say what your pronouns are, and I'll have $500,000, thank you. But then, of course, that means that these school boards are actually going to have to do something about it. They don't want to lose that kind of money.
Right. No, that's exactly right. The school boards are going to have to implement policies that allow people to speak the truth, that refuse to compel teachers and students alike to engage in speech with which they disagree. They're absolutely going to have to do that, which relates in some ways to a recent case concerning Title IX, which I think we could talk about if you'd like, because there were some very important free speech implications.
Well, if you can explain what Title IX is, I think it's to do with the quality of sexes in schools or something. Is that right?
Yeah, so Title IX was enacted in 1972 to prohibit sex discrimination in schools.
Okay, fine. And then the Biden administration made some changes to this.
Right. So when Congress enacted Title IX in 1972, it said that the administration had the authority to enable promulgating regulations to implement it, which they did in 1975. And what President Biden did in April of 2022 was announce that those regulations were going to be completely rehauled. And one thing the rehaul was going to do was going to redefine the word sex to include so-called gender identity for all purposes under the statute. And that has now been vacated.
Okay, because, I mean, that includes self-IDing, isn't it? So you can literally have young boys say, I'm a girl, be able to go into women's only spaces and also compete in sports, right?
There are far-reaching implications. So what the administration proposed in 2022 and then finalized in 2024 was, yes, essentially self-ID. Any boy or man could call himself a girl or woman and be permitted to participate in sports and access the locker rooms and bathrooms associated with his so-called woman gender identity. But also it redefined sexual harassment under Title IX. So this is critically important for viewers of your show, which is to say that Title IX also contains some really stringent prohibitions on sexual harassment in schools and on college campuses, which is great. But one of the things that the Biden rule would have done was provide that so-called misgendering, i.e. the use of accurate sex pronouns, could constitute sexual harassment under Title IX. So that's one of the things that a court recently ruled was unconstitutional in violation of the First Amendment.
Wow, so these are gone now. Has it gone from all states, or is this from half of them, or is there more work to do, essentially, is what I'm saying, in terms of getting rid of these very, I would argue, backward laws?
So the ruling that came down on Thursday came from the Eastern District of Kentucky, and it pertained to claims that had been filed only by 5 states. However, the court did something extraordinary in this case, which is that the states which were challenging the Biden administration asked the court to block the rule from taking effect in those states. But the court went much further and it vacated the entire rule. So as of now, it's as though the rule proposed in 2022 and finalized in 2024 doesn't exist at all anywhere in the country. Now, the ruling that was announced on Thursday of last week is considered final. And what that means is that the administration has the opportunity to appeal to the circuit court and possibly to the Supreme Court. However, we're also in a situation where the administration is about to change hands in a week and a half. So most people think that the Department of Education, which has lost resoundingly in this case, is unlikely to appeal.
Yeah, well, that was what I was going to ask was, of course, the incoming government. We've got Donald Trump imminently to be president. Is that the death knell of gender ideology, do you think, in America? Or do you think it will cling on through our institution, through your institutions?
It is most likely, in my view, the death knell of the rule that the Biden administration proposed in 2022 and finalized in 2024. I would love to think it is the death knell of all of so-called gender identity ideology in the United States. However, we have a lot more work to do. It's going to take many more years before we expel from other institutions, before we expel it from corporations, from other aspects of academia. This ruling is an incredible victory for those of us who care about free speech and about the sex-based rights of women and girls. No doubt about it. It's a resounding victory, but it's limited to Title IX. And so there's a lot more work to do.
Well, I imagine you're going to keep on doing it, and congratulations on this victory, and keep up the good fight. Kara Dansky, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on Free Speech Nation, we'll get some more feedback from our audience here on the latest social media bombshell news. See you in a couple of minutes.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
If you're about to jet off to the Mediterranean for some winter sun, then west is certainly best at this time. It's high pressure that's in charge across parts of Iberia into southern France to provide relatively fine conditions at the moment, but further towards Italy and around the Adriatic towards Turkey as well, we've currently got some heavy rain, even heavy snowfall across inland areas. This will be continuing over the next couple of days or so, but is expected to ease during the forthcoming week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support. It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Underestimate what you did, because to do it in their backyard as well, I bet they weren't happy about it, were they, Brad?
No, definitely not. Well, it makes it all the more sweeter. So they're usually pretty dominant in a two-man event, but four-man's usually where we can challenge them. And yeah, we managed to do it yesterday and put down 2 solid runs. And yeah,
so yeah, funding was a big issue for us in the last quad, but because of our results recently, we've picked up a lot more funding from UK Sport. So we're well funded now, and but yeah, the Bob is in the back of the van behind us, so we're driving it down to St Moritz as we speak. So yeah, it's, that's how it all works in the background in bobsleigh.
Brad, you're the pilot, correct? So you're up front.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah,
what happens? I always wonder, because I remember seeing John Noakes on. Do you remember John Noakes on Blue Peter when he fell out of the bob and he ended up showing the back of his backside on TV because he had a big scar on there? What? So you've got the brake man. You're at the front. So where are you then, Aaron? Are you what number are you?
So I'm number 3. Yeah.
Right. So what do you do there? Is it just a matter of it's the running power is what it's all about to get off to a good start, and then you can sit and enjoy the ride?
Yeah, that's it. So for number 2 and myself, number 3, it's all about getting that bob off the line and then just zipping it up to as high a speed as we can, basically. Getting in, staying low, having good aerodynamics and staying still and let Brad do the work.
Yeah, it's definitely not a comfortable position for them because we're bending them and twisting them into quite an uncomfortable position to get as aerodynamic as possible. And when you've got 6 times G's pushing you through that is not... Yeah, not
definitely
fun.
stiff back this morning, that's for sure.
Because I'm just thinking where me and Eamon would sit. Is it 2 and 3, or would he go at number 4? What do you fancy?
I would be too frightened to do that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. It is time now for Social Sensations, the part of the show where we look at what has been going viral this week on social media. We have our first clip, and this is with shocking scenes of wildfires in LA. A fire department chief in the area has gone viral after she was caught saying this, and I love it.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better. Is she strong enough to do this? Or you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
I just so I don't know if you got that. She was basically like reading out audience questions, and someone had said, well, are you strong enough to lift out my husband? And she was like, well, if your husband's in a fire, he's in the wrong place, which kind of suggests she's not maybe in the right job there.
It was victim blaming, isn't it? But let's go to her first point about needing a fire person to look like you. I promise I don't. If I'm in a fire, I just don't want to be in a fire. That's my only criteria.
That's it. Well, yeah, and if they're bald, I guess it would be like, how did you lose your hair? By not being particularly good at your job.
Everyone in a fire is in the wrong place. Everyone. Everyone.
Except for the fireman.
Except for the firewoman.
You would make a great firefighter with that attitude.
And it's actually more the other way around, isn't it? If you want a firefighter who's big and tough and so on, and you're in, say, California or LA, you're in the wrong place. Because then you're going to get a firefighter who looks like you, and that's the last thing I want. And yeah, I don't want to see a middle-aged balding man turn up and do I really have to? No.
Hey, what are you doing here? You're in the wrong place. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, of course, we've seen it across different institutions, including the army, as you mentioned earlier.
Some matter more than others.
Yeah, where physical strength is part of the job description, surely.
You would think.
You would think, but to celebrate that in America, the way that she said it with such kind of confidence or arrogance.
Just what to make of it.
It is crazy, isn't it?
I can't believe they taught her that at fireman's school. Fireperson.
But not only they taught it, but the fact that she sort of says it in this, it's publicity for the fire department.
It's the nth degree of this kind of thinking, isn't it? That even because this is the point where you say, "Oh, come on, what would happen in a fire?" And this is where we all supposed to agree. We want the strongest dude possible to knock a door down and bring us out. But even in this place, she and plenty of other people will be saying, yes, I want the fireman to look exactly like me.
Yes.
I want to feel represented by someone rescuing me.
Absolutely mad.
I don't.
All right, well, we've got another social sensation for you now. A clip from Mark Zuckerberg this week on the Joe Rogan podcast, in which the CEO of Meta, that's Facebook and Instagram, talks about Biden administration's influence on him during the COVID vaccine rollout.
They pushed us super hard to take down things that were true, right? I mean, they basically pushed us and said, you know, anything that says that vaccines might have side effects, you basically need to take down. And I was just like, well, we're not going to do that. Like, we're clearly not going to do that. I mean, that is kind of inarguably true.
Who is they? Who's telling you to take down things that
it was
that talk about vaccine side effects?
It was people in the Biden administration. I think it was I wasn't involved in those conversations directly.
Cresta, this is an incredible admittance. Because a lot of people are going, oh, it's a conspiracy. Like, everyone's like, oh, no, they're deliberately withholding. And then you find out this has actually been going on.
Yeah, I don't know which... But I don't find it unbelievable that happened. Is that what you mean?
No, but the fact that it turned out to be true...
The side effects, or you mean that Biden's administration were stopping people?
And now this has been no. I mean, you're right. It doesn't surprise me. But the people who were saying that this kind of stuff was going on were called conspiracy theorists.
People who were saying that side effects were.
No, they were saying that
that people like Facebook were stopping.
We're holding things back.
People like Facebook. That's not a person called Facebook. Yeah, of course. I think good. Finally, but it's a bit late, isn't it?
Well, it is a bit late, but at the same time, it's better late than never. At
least it's happening. People are saying Mark Zuckerberg's a coward because he didn't do anything or say anything at the right time when he should have done. There's an element of that, but I think that's been going on all over the place. I think lots of people have been kowtowing to a really intimidating ideology that has been so insistent. And and the way it works is if you're not making the right moves and saying the right thing, you are evil. And your company's evil. And, of course, that's been affecting people. It's been stopping people freely saying what they think and what they really want to do. So, yes, but at the same time, he did say no to them on a number of things to do with COVID and so on.
Yeah, putting out memes and stuff. They wanted cancelled.
There couldn't be anything that didn't go with the party line. That's 1984,
and this is why
isn't it?
we need community notes, because I'm not saying community notes is perfect. I'm saying the other is worse.
Yes.
Sorry.
No.
I was just going to add on the fact-checking is there was an Babylon Bee, the satirical site, and they put up some of the things that have been fact-checked by these fact-checkers, and they had one that was saying that CNN had bought a giant washing machine of industrial side in order to spin the news more, and then Snopes got involved and went, that's not true.
Well, as you know, the far left does not have a sense of humour. And actually, interestingly, one of the stories we covered earlier about this kindergarten in Austria, and someone put up that story, and they banned it. So they haven't made these changes yet, but it'll be interesting to see what happens when it does go through. But do you think it matters at all that Mark Zuckerberg has sort of going on Joe Rogan and putting out this video? I mean, but do you think it matters his reason? People say, oh, it's Trump and he's just trying to go where the political tides of sending him, as opposed to, he's now at least he's making the right call.
The reason I believe him is because he looks the part now, doesn't he? He looks like he's been to the gym. He looks like he's got some confidence in himself. It feels authentic to me. I don't know if it matters.
It's strange, isn't it? Because he's definitely the most human I've ever... He's always been this kind of robot before.
Human, isn't he? He's
he's got the Jew fro.
I think his balls have just dropped, actually, because it's also the other side of this is watching all the people on Facebook, and many of our business who are in full panic mode right now.
Yeah.
They're like, we have to leave Facebook. We've got to find somewhere safe to hide where we can say our things. Same as they all ran off to, was it Blue Sky or something? From X, where they can say their simplistic opinions and not have anyone challenge them. They don't really mean.
No, but they will get challenged because you can never be woke enough. And
of course, they'll tear each other to pieces. Yes.
The bubble is getting smaller. We've got a few minutes for some questions from our audience. Our first, I believe, is Melvin. Are you going to ask the first one?
Yes. Do you think that members of Parliament, once they make some important announcements, should be put on a lie detector machine?
Oh, wow. You are very cynical, aren't you?
A little bit.
Yeah. There are no politicians in your mind that actually speak the truth?
I can only think of about 100.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to say no, because that's a huge waste of public funds, isn't it? I mean, can't we just say if their lips are moving, that'll do?
Well, there is a downside. The machines might blow up in certain circumstances.
There you go.
Thank you very much. So, it's a tricky one, but I personally think that actually it's... I just don't trust anything, and we don't need lie detectors. We just have to take everything with a pinch of salt. Big Steve, you've got a question then. You've got the boobs back out.
I've got it, haven't I? Will Lewis Schaefer ever get to host Headliners?
OK, let's move on to another question. I don't know if it would work with it. I mean, Lewis is an audience favourite, very funny comic, very good friend, very old friend of mine. But it's like, the thing is, Lewis destroys. and to put in a position of authority.
It's destroying me.
He is destroying.
Lewis is chaos. Chaos on legs.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful where you put him.
Special. I did call for that.
No one's that special.
No. Fair enough.
Anyway, we'll see how it goes. Please never mention that name. Anton, you got a question, do you?
Are there too many ads on Facebook?
Too many ads on Facebook? I don't know. I mean, you bring it back to Facebook. The thing that I wanted, I don't know. To be honest, I haven't been on Facebook for quite a long time, and it's partly through this censorship. But I'm wondering, the thing that I'm wondering, and I actually didn't get a chance to really talk about this in the interview earlier because we only had a few minutes with him, was I wonder if people now need to get tougher. And that's what I've seen on X.
You mean personally more resilient?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, of course.
I mean, like people, I think, over the last 10, 15 years have been so sort of protected in their bubble that they take a person's different opinion as a direct attack on who they are. And I'm wondering now if what's happening on what's happened on X is what we're also going to see on now Facebook and Instagram, where people are just going to have to it's going to be hard for a little bit.
Well, as Steve Hughes, I think it was Steve Hughes, the Aussie comic, said years and years and years ago, nothing happens. You can be offended. Do you remember that?
Yeah, but it does feel like when they are offended, it is like the end of the world.
Yeah, but it isn't, though, is it?
No, of course it isn't. We know that, but that's only because we've been sort of...
Harden up. Harden up, isn't it?
Toughen up.
There's something really weak about it all. Just like, oh, someone said a thing I don't like. Oh, no, the world's going to end. The fabric of society is torn to pieces. And like, no, harden up a little bit. I think it's actually about adverts, though. Which you want to see more nudity? Is that it? More nudists? Bring them back. So yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think it's. I find it very strange around me that people go, oh, someone said something I don't like. This is awful. When it's like, well, it's just someone who disagrees with you.
Yeah.
I want them to say the thing, so I know that I don't like Lewis
that's
Schaefer.
The whole point, yeah. And the other thing is, of course, the difference on Facebook and Instagram is that it's going to be people, their own profiles. So that's going to be an interesting element to it. Right, thank you very much for joining us for Free Speech Nation. Thank you very much to my panel, Cresta Wetton and Kerry Marks, and, of course, to all my brilliant guests this evening. And make sure you get in touch with your stories by emailing freespeechnation@gbnews.uk. And if you want to join us live in the studio and be part of our wonderful audience, thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it, guys. It's very, very cold out there, so it means a lot you being here. Please go to www.sroaudiences.com. Now, stay tuned for the brilliant Ben Leo tonight with Alex Armstrong. That is coming up next. And don't forget that Headliners is on every night at 11 p.m. And tonight's got Lewis Schaefer on it as well. So that is a late-night paper preview show where comedians talk you through the next day's top news stories. Thank you very much for watching Free Speech Nation. Goodbye. See you next week. Take care.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. The forthcoming week is all about north to south contrast, and we'll see some of this becoming evident in the overnight period as well, because the winds are going to be picking up in the north with gales widely around coastal districts, and as a band of rain pushes its way into the northwest of Scotland, there'll be outbreaks of drizzle for Northern Ireland as well. Generally a drier and calmer night for England and Wales underneath some clearer spells, but with those clear skies around, temperatures will drop off, some patchy frost for eastern Wales, parts of southeastern England as well. So as you step out the door first thing on Monday morning, there will still be a chill in the air for these more central and southern areas. A touch of brightness is possible first thing, but generally